Fuck you looking at, fat boy? I'm a cat. Fuck!
The film begins at a high school where a group of bullies, led by Miles, singles out students they consider weak. Their main target is Jimmy Mulligan, a chubby, kind-hearted boy who quietly endures their torment without fighting back. By his side are his two close friends, Andy and Bobby, who are also branded as losers. But as time goes on, Miles's constant insults start to break Jimmy down, draining his strength and pushing him to his limits. Though Jimmy's mom noticed something was wrong, she couldn't get him to talk about the problems he faced after school. Jimmy started avoiding his friends and declined every invitation to hang out, afraid of running into Miles the bully from his neighborhood. But being careful didn't protect him. One day on his way to school, Jimmy unexpectedly ran into Miles and his gang. Miles boldly demanded $100, an amount Jimmy couldn't possibly pay. Every time Jimmy tried to explain, the tension only grew worse. Miles became more and more aggressive, repeatedly demanding the $100 from Jimmy and warning him not to say a word. But just when the situation was about to explode, Miles suddenly stepped back. He had noticed Vinny watching from afar. Vinny was famous for being tough, fearless, and respected, with no patience for bullying. His calm but intimidating presence was enough to make even the toughest bullies think twice. Miles didn't only pick on Jimmy, he often bullied Bobby too, teasing him about his slightly feminine style. After Bobby was humiliated in front of the whole class, he felt crushed. Jimmy did his best to comfort him and promised they wouldn't let the bullies keep getting away with it. To lift their spirits, he invited Andy and Bobby to lunch in the cafeteria and insisted on treating them. When they saw Jimmy eagerly digging into a bigger meal than usual, both friends were surprised by this new, confident side of him. Andy and Bobby never teased Jimmy about his eating habits. Instead, they supported him and even introduced him to Adrienne, a classmate who often stole shy glances at Jimmy during lunch. Just as things were starting to feel a bit more normal, Miles showed up again. He sat down next to Jimmy and demanded the $100 he claimed was owed. His bullying grew louder until another student finally spoke up, telling him to back off. But instead of backing down, Miles snapped, hurling insults and berating the student, turning the cafeteria tense and uncomfortable in an instant. But then, another student taller and stronger than Miles stepped in, deciding it was time to put a stop to his bullying. Miles's confidence disappeared immediately, and he quickly left the cafeteria. However, the trouble didn't end there. After school, Miles confronted Jimmy again, still demanding the money. This time, Jimmy stood firm, refusing to back down and insisting he didn't owe Miles anything. His defiance infuriated Miles, who suddenly lost control and attacked Jimmy right on the sidewalk. Just as Miles was about to finish the beating, an elderly man suddenly appeared and threatened to call the police, startling him enough to make him run off. The man introduced himself as Mr. Action and took Jimmy home to help treat his injuries. While there, Jimmy spotted a photo of a boxer on the wall and was shocked to learn that Mr. Action was once a national boxing champion. Driven by a new determination to stand up to Miles and stop the bullying, Jimmy begged Mr. Action to train him. Although too old to coach personally, Mr. Action agreed to help and promised to reach out to some friends who could guide Jimmy on his journey. After bringing Jimmy home, Mr. Action had to explain everything to the boy's parents, who were shocked to see their son with a black eye. He told them what had happened and recommended enrolling Jimmy in a self-defense class. Although they were unsure at first, they asked for some time to think it over. Just a few days later, Mr. Action heard a knock at his door and found Jimmy standing there, now with both eyes bruised. Realizing how serious things had become, his parents didn't hesitate any longer. Grateful for Mr. Action's support, they agreed to let Jimmy learn boxing and personally took him to Manny's Boxing Training Center, a gym run by Mr. Action's close friend, so he could get proper training. Mr. Action asked his friend Manny to train Jimmy, and with just one look and a brief explanation, Manny understood what the boy was going through. Jimmy's bruises told part of the story, but it was the determination in his eyes that convinced Manny to help on one condition: Jimmy had to stay committed and never give up. Under Manny's tough training program, Jimmy began working hard and making steady progress, with Mr. Action closely monitoring his improvement. During one session, Jimmy opened up to Mr. Action about how Miles kept pressuring him for the $100. Hearing this only strengthened Mr. Action's resolve to help Jimmy become strong enough to face anything that came his way. Mr. Action quickly came up with a plan. Instead of avoiding Miles, Jimmy would offer to pay him $200, but only after 1 month. He believed that with intense training during that time, Jimmy would be ready to stand up for himself and wouldn't have to pay anything in the end. The next day, when Miles showed up demanding the money, Jimmy calmly said he had taken a part-time job and would be paid in a month. He offered double the amount if Miles was willing to wait. Though irritated by the delay, Miles agreed and backed off for now. For the first time in weeks, Jimmy finally had a break from Miles's constant demands. But during that afternoon's boxing session, he looked drained, moving slowly and lacking his usual energy. Jimmy brushed it off as physical exhaustion, but Manny, with years of coaching experience, saw through it. He sensed the problem was emotional, not physical. Worried about the sudden change in Jimmy's attitude, Manny gently brought it up, admitting he was concerned and that it seemed like Jimmy had lost his motivation to train. On the way home, Mr. Action noticed that Jimmy seemed down and gently asked what was bothering him. Jimmy finally opened up, letting out the frustration he'd been holding in. He felt like all the training had been for nothing. Even though he was giving it his best, he still saw himself as too weak to stand up to Miles or defend himself. Hearing the disappointment in Jimmy's voice, Mr. Action reassured him, reminding him that no effort is ever wasted. He explained that the lessons learned through hard work would stay with him, no matter what happened in the end. When Jimmy got home, his father noticed he didn't look well and seemed to be wearing down. Though clearly worried, he didn't push Jimmy for answers. Instead, he respected his son's choice to keep training and shared a quiet hope that someday, Jimmy would become strong enough to teach his own kids how to protect themselves, so they wouldn't have to grow up in fear like he once did. Those words lit a spark in Jimmy. Thinking them over, he realized he needed to dig deeper and give even more. From that moment on, he approached his training with renewed focus and determination. The next day, Miles and his gang went back to tormenting Jimmy and his friends. This time, they took things even further by physically attacking Bobby in front of a crowd. Jimmy rushed to find Bobby sitting alone in tears and tried to comfort him. Bobby, overwhelmed and hopeless, felt completely powerless, convinced that no one, not even the teachers, could stop Miles and his gang. But Jimmy wasn't ready to give up. He had a plan and was determined to take a stand, determined to end the cycle of bullying at school once and for all. Fueled by determination, Jimmy raced home, hopped on his bike, and pedaled all the way to Manny's gym, a trip he usually avoided because of the long distance, often relying on Mr. Action for a ride. His sudden burst of energy brought a smile to Mr. Action's face. In his excitement, Jimmy accidentally bumped into Manny and tumbled to the floor. But instead of being upset, Manny smiled, recognizing the fire in Jimmy's eyes. From that day forward, Jimmy tackled every training session with intense focus and passion. Seeing how quickly he was improving, Manny stepped things up, adding tougher workouts and introducing mixed martial arts techniques to help Jimmy become a more complete and capable fighter. While Manny focused on building Jimmy's physical strength, Mr. Action worked on strengthening his spirit, offering constant support and meaningful advice. At school, Jimmy opened up to Andy about his boxing training and his goal to stand up to Miles and end the bullying. Around the same time, Adrian approached Jimmy and started a conversation. The two quickly hit it off and made plans to meet after school. They ended up going to a party at a friend's house where honest, heartfelt conversations revealed a strong connection and natural chemistry between them. In that warm, genuine setting, a budding romance quietly began to grow. As Jimmy started finding happiness with Adrian, Eddie, one of Miles's closest friends, began mocking their relationship with taunts and insults. But this time, Jimmy didn't back down. Filled with new confidence, he stood his ground, and Eddie backed off. Time flew by, and the day of Jimmy's long-awaited showdown with Miles finally arrived. He was no longer the shy, bullied kid he once was. Now, he was ready, determined to put an end to the threats and intimidation that had haunted him for far too long. That morning, Jimmy woke up feeling unusually calm and confident. As soon as he got to school, Miles confronted him, warning that if Jimmy backed out or tried to run, his friends would pay the price. The pressure was intense, so Jimmy stepped into the bathroom to collect himself, only to unexpectedly run into Vinny, who already knew about the conflict with Miles. Aware that Jimmy had been training at Manny's gym, Vinny offered a few encouraging words and wished him luck in the fight. What neither of them knew was that Eddie had been hiding in a nearby stall, listening to everything. As soon as they left, he rushed off to tell Miles what he had heard. Following Miles's orders, Eddie reached out to Billy Glassjaw, a well-known troublemaker, and set up a plan for him to challenge Jimmy right at school. News of the upcoming showdown between Jimmy and Miles spread fast, grabbing the attention of students and teachers alike, all curious to see who would win. When Jimmy approached Miles and his gang, he carried himself with a new sense of confidence, and Miles could immediately tell that the fear Jimmy once had was gone. Caught off guard by the change, Miles quickly came up with a new plan: use Glassjaw to take Jimmy down fast and brutally. But before the plan could unfold, Vinny stepped in, having his crew abduct Glassjaw to ensure Miles would have to face Jimmy in a fair fight. As the showdown began, Jimmy struggled at first, taking hard, relentless blows from Miles. But giving up was never an option. Bit by bit, he began to push back, landing sharp, powerful punches of his own. Even after a heavy hit to the face, Jimmy didn't flinch. He stood his ground, no longer the weak, timid kid he used to be. With unshakable determination, he fought not just for himself, but for every underdog who had ever been bullied like he had. As the fight began to swing in Jimmy's favor, Miles grew more desperate. A few of his crew members moved to step in, but Andy and Bobby stood their ground, silently showing they weren't afraid anymore. They were ready to back Jimmy no matter what. The tension escalated, but in the end, Jimmy and his friends overpowered Miles, forcing him to admit defeat. After the fight, Jimmy stepped forward and demanded that Miles stop the violence, not just against him or his friends, but against anyone at school. Miles responded with a cold, emotionless stare, showing no sign of regret. From a distance, Mr. Action watched the whole scene unfold, quietly smiling with pride. To him, Jimmy hadn't just won a fight, he had reclaimed his courage, his confidence, and the dignity that had always been his. Mr. Action saw that even though Jimmy had become stronger, he still had the same kind heart, a quality Jimmy hadn't yet fully seen in himself. The showdown with Miles was recorded by onlookers and quickly went viral on social media. Before long, the video attracted massive attention, even drawing interest from a local news station. The fight stood out not just for its intensity, but as a powerful symbol of courage, one student brave enough to stand up against long-standing bullying and injustice.
Jump in. Parents! You might want to see this. It wasn't, albeit unorthodox.
All's fair.
I really don't like you fighting, but I'm glad you did well.
Take the family jewels.